Hey everybody, ready to unlock some serious personal power.
Oh, yeah.
Today we're diving deep into Tony Robbins' Awaken the Giant Within.
One of the classics.
But we're not just skimming the surface.
No
We're
way.
extracting those tactical nuggets, those moves you can use like today to seriously shift your life.
Love it. Get right to the practical stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Robbins goes way beyond that, like, surface level motivation, you know what I mean?
Yeah, the rah-rah stuff.
He gives you a whole framework, a system. You can actually decode why you do what you do, and more importantly, how to actually change those patterns.
It's self-mastery 101.
Right. And he doesn't mess around. Right away, he hits us with the power of decisions. Like, it's not enough to just know what to do.
Oh, yeah, we all know that.
Right. Plenty of people know. But it's about actually taking action.
Bridging that gap.
What's that missing link?
It's those decisions. They're like the bridge. They interrupt the autopilot.
Yeah.
Think about it when you make a real decision.
Mm-hmm.
It signals to your whole system, like your brain, your body, even your subconscious, that things are changing. It's commitment in action.
And he tells this wild story about his business partner basically betraying him.
Oh, no.
Embezzling money, leaving him in crazy debt. Everyone's telling him, file for bankruptcy, cut your losses.
Yeah, the safe route, right?
But Robbins,
Yeah.
he decides to turn the whole thing around.
He doubled down.
Unbelievable.
It shows that a powerful decision
Yeah.
can overrule even expert advice. Robbins decided failure was not an option,
Wow.
and that decision fueled everything after it and led him to success.
It's like defying destiny.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder, have you ever been in a spot where you knew what you had to do but just couldn't act?
Oh, all the time.
What small decision could you make today to like shift that momentum?
That's the beauty of even tiny decisions.
Right.
Creating that momentum. Robbins goes on to explore this idea of pain and pleasure as the driving forces behind basically everything we do.
He takes this idea deep, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's not just like, I want cake and I don't want to get stung by a bee.
Right.
He's saying we link pain and pleasure to our habits, to our core beliefs.
Absolutely.
Even to fears that seem totally irrational at first glance.
This is where it gets interesting.
Yeah.
He argues that beneath most of our actions, whether it's reaching for another cookie or staying in that dead-end job,
Oh, I felt that.
there's a subconscious calculation going on. We're always trying to avoid pain or gain pleasure.
It's like our internal software is running on this pain-pleasure algorithm, making choices before we even realize it.
Precisely. And the fascinating part is Robbins actually hacked this system himself.
Wait.
He conditioned himself to love learning,
Okay.
not in some abstract way, but by linking it to the pleasure of figuring out human behavior,
Fascinating.
which led to getting what he wanted in life.
So he turned learning into this pleasure trigger,
Yeah.
not a chore. But how did he actually do that?
Well, he talks about setting up this reward system for himself. So each time he learned something new, particularly about human behavior, he'd let himself indulge in something he enjoyed, something pleasurable.
Interesting.
Over time, his brain started linking learning with those good vibes, like Pavlov's dogs, but for personal growth.
So if we could figure out how to link pleasure to things that are good for us and pain to those bad habits we want to break, could we reprogram ourselves?
That's the implication. It's about rewiring, not willpower. Think about a habit you want to change. What pleasure are you getting from keeping it, and what pain could you link to holding on to it?
Whoa, that's a serious mind shift. It's not about forcing, it's about changing the underlying formula. Robbins takes this further with the whole concept of beliefs. He states that it's our beliefs, not our circumstances, that create our reality.
Big statement.
Is this just positive thinking, or is there more to it?
It's so much deeper than just slapping on a smile. It ties back to that pain-pleasure principle.
Oh.
We act based on what we believe
Mhm.
will lead to either a good or bad outcome. Even if the belief is totally wrong, it still drives our choices.
So even a limiting belief like, I'm not good enough or I'll never be rich, can become self-fulfilling if we're not careful.
Precisely. And those beliefs often work beneath the surface. He tells the story about a woman who went through a painful breakup,
Ouch.
and she subconsciously linked passionate love with that pain.
So she's like pushing love away.
Yeah, even though she desperately wanted a loving relationship, she was sabotaging herself without realizing it.
That's heartbreaking. It highlights how strong those hidden beliefs can be.
Yeah.
Think about it. Do you have any beliefs about yourself or the world that might be holding you back? And what evidence do you have for those beliefs? Is it solid or just an old story? It's like taking inventory of our mental furniture. What needs to be tossed and replaced with something more useful.
Spring cleaning for the mind.
Now, Robbins dives into something he calls global metaphors, and this is where things get really interesting.
I love this part.
He says we all have these unconscious ways of framing our whole lives,
Yeah.
like seeing it as a battle, a journey, a game, and so on. What's the big deal with these metaphors?
Think of it like this. If your metaphor is life is a battle,
Okay.
you're going to approach everything with a fighter's mindset.
Always on guard, ready to defend.
Exactly. Which might be good sometimes, but it can also create unnecessary conflict and stress.
So even small shifts in our metaphors can change how we experience the world and how we react to challenges. He tells this story about a guy having a full-blown panic attack.
Oh, wow.
And Robbins instantly calms him down just by changing the metaphor he was using.
That's incredible.
He reframed it as simply whiting out a mistake, like you would on paper.
Interesting.
The guy's entire emotional state shifted because the metaphor shifted.
The power of words.
Right. If our words are that powerful, it makes you think. What metaphors am I using to define my life right now? Is it a thrilling adventure, a soul-crushing grind, or something in between? And is that metaphor helping or hurting?
The key is awareness.
Yeah.
Once you see the metaphor running the show, you can choose one that's more empowering.
It's like we're directing our own internal movies, choosing the soundtrack, the scenery, the whole vibe. Now, Robbins gets into this concept of emotional mastery, but it's not just think positive and all that. He says our emotions aren't good or bad. They're signals prompting us to take action.
He flips the script on emotions.
Right.
Instead of ignoring feelings, he teaches us to see them as
Information
about what's going on inside.
So he breaks down specific emotions into action signals, like fear, for example. He says it's not something to run from. It's a signal that maybe we need more information, more skills, or just a shift in perspective. It's a messenger, not the enemy.
Love that reframing.
And frustration is a sign that our approach is hitting a wall.
Time for plan B.
Right. Time to get flexible, try a new route. Then there's anger, which often shows up when our values or boundaries are crossed. That's a cue to reevaluate our communication, maybe set some limits.
It's about taking back control.
I love the story he tells about this Fijian village where they linked joy to the sound of a train whistle. Yeah. It highlights that we can choose what triggers positive emotions.
We don't have to wait for the outside world to dictate how we feel.
Right. We can create joy by linking it to something within our control.
Powerful.
So instead of waiting to win the lottery to feel happy, we can find those little triggers in our everyday lives.
Exactly.
But what about when those tougher emotions hit? Say you're stuck in a cycle of fear or frustration. How do you break free?
That's where the real work begins. It's not about ignoring them. It's about getting curious. What's the message trying to get through? What action does it want you to take?
So fear might be saying, hey, you need some new skills here. For frustration might be saying, this isn't working, try something else. And anger might be saying, hey, your boundaries are being crossed, time to speak up.
Exactly. Emotions are like an internal GPS guiding us towards what we value and away from what's harmful. Now, speaking of values, Robbins dives into this values hierarchy idea.
Okay.
He says we all have this unique set of values, these core emotional states we prioritize above all others.
Things like love, security, adventure, freedom, growth. Everyone's got their own mix.
Right. And he argues that these values combined with our rules,
I like that rules.
which are basically beliefs about what has to happen for us to feel like those values are being met,
Okay.
shape pretty much everything we do.
So if I value freedom, my rule might be I feel free when I can travel whenever I want. Or if I value security, my rule might be I feel secure when I have a stable job and savings.
Exactly. And the interesting thing is those rules can either empower us or trap us. If our rules are too rigid or unrealistic, they can set us up for disappointment.
He tells a story about himself, actually, about how he used to put achievement and success above everything else.
Classic overachiever.
Right. Drove him to do amazing things, but it also led to burnout and always being on edge.
It wasn't until he consciously moved happiness higher up on his values list that things started to change.
So he had to rewrite his own internal code.
Exactly. And surprisingly, when he stopped chasing happiness as a side effect of achievement, he found more fulfillment in all areas, even his work.
Makes you think, what are my top 3 values?
Yeah.
And what are the rules I've attached to those? Are those rules serving me or setting me up for a struggle?
That's a powerful exercise. Now, Robbins gets into references.
Okay.
It's this idea that our past experiences, both real and imagined, create our beliefs, our values, even our identity.
So if I had a bad experience public speaking in the past, I might develop a belief that I'm terrible at public speaking and that influences my future choices.
Exactly. But the good news is
Yeah.
our past doesn't have to control our future. We can choose which references to focus on, and we can even reinterpret past experiences in a way that empowers us.
So instead of dwelling on that one public speaking flop, I could focus on the times I've presented successfully in smaller groups, or even just the times I've shared my ideas confidently in conversations.
That's the power of reframing. Robbins tells this story about watching a solar eclipse. And he decided beforehand to enjoy it no matter what, even if it was cloudy or something went wrong. And he had an amazing time, even though the conditions weren't ideal.
He chose to focus on the positive reference before it even happened. He set himself up for success.
Exactly. It's about being proactive with our references. Think of a time you achieved something challenging. What references or beliefs did you draw on? What gave you the confidence to overcome those obstacles?
We've all got those inner reserves of strength. It's about tapping into those positive references, those memories of success, and using them to fuel our future efforts.
Mhm.
Robbins then dives into this idea that we can actually change our beliefs. It's not just positive thinking. It's about understanding how our brains create those associations and using that to rewrite the script.
He calls it neuroassociative conditioning, or NAC.
NAC.
Based on the idea that our brains connect thoughts, feelings, and actions. So if we can interrupt those patterns and create new, more empowering connections, we can reprogram our responses.
So it's like hacking our neural pathways.
Yeah.
But how do you actually DO that?
Robbins has a process. First, you got to identify the belief. You want to change that old story that's no longer helping you. Write it down, get it out there.
Okay, so let's say my limiting belief is I'm not good enough. What's next?
Interrupt the pattern. Robbins talks about physical actions like jumping or clapping to break that automatic response, hitting the reset button.
So it's not just thinking differently, it's feeling the shift in your body too.
Exactly. You got to engage the whole system. Then you create a new empowering alternative. So instead of I'm not good enough, it could be I am capable and worthy. Write that down too.
Okay, I've got my old belief and my new one. What's the final step?
Conditioning. You got to make that new belief feel real. Robbins recommends repetition and emotional intensity.
So repeat it, write it, visualize it, really feel it.
Exactly. The more you activate that pathway, the stronger it gets, like building a muscle.
So it's not just changing our minds, it's changing our bodies too. It's a whole system approach.
Yeah.
Now, Robbins talks about transformational vocabulary.
Mm.
This idea that the words we use to describe our experiences actually shape those experiences.
Change your language, change your feelings.
So instead of saying, I'm stressed out,
Yeah.
I could say, I'm feeling a little challenged. Instead of, I'm overwhelmed, I could say, I have a lot on my plate, but I can handle it.
Exactly. It might sound simple, but it's powerful. Even those small shifts can have a big impact.
It's like we're choosing the soundtrack of our lives.
Hmm.
Now, Robbins goes back to metaphors, but this time, how they show up in everyday life.
Yeah.
He says, if we're struggling, we might be using a metaphor that's disempowering us.
For example, if you see life as a constant battle, you're always going to be on the defensive looking for enemies. That can be tiring.
So if you're stuck, maybe you're seeing life as a prison or quicksand.
And if you see it that way, you're less likely to try to escape.
Makes sense.
The key is to be aware of those metaphors and choose ones that are more empowering.
So if I'm feeling trapped, I could shift my thinking to see it as a journey or an adventure.
That opens up new possibilities and inspires you to take risks.
It's like I'm the screenwriter of my own life story, choosing the genre, setting the whole narrative. Robbins gets practical and talks about setting goals. He says goals are essential for pushing past limits and stepping into a world of power.
But not just any goals.
Right.
He says choose goals that truly inspire you, goals that are big enough to challenge you and ignite that inner fire.
So not clean the kitchen goals, but write a novel or climb Mount Everest goals.
Exactly, the ones that make you feel alive. And once you have those goals, make them feel real. Robbins talks about visualization, emotional intensity, even physical actions to bring those goals to life.
So I can make a vision board, write my goals in detail, even share them with others for accountability.
Exactly. And celebrate your wins along the way. Each one reinforces that neural pathway and keeps you motivated.
It's building momentum. One of the biggest challenges with goals is procrastination. We all know what we should be doing, but we put it off.
Robbins has insights on that. He says we procrastinate because we link more pain to doing it than to putting it off.
So that voice in our head saying, ugh, this is going to be hard. I'd rather watch
That's
Netflix.
exact. But you can flip that. You need to link more pain to inaction and more pleasure to action.
So I could focus on the negative consequences of not finishing that project, missing a deadline, losing a client, feeling guilty.
Right. And focus on the rewards of completing it, the accomplishment, the gain, the relief.
It's about shifting the balance. Robbins also talks about mastering our time. He says time is our most valuable resource, but most of us don't manage it well.
He recommends starting by seeing how you actually spend your time. Track it for a week, you might be surprised.
No more where did the day go? It's about being real with our time.
And once you see clearly, you can make changes. Robbins suggests finding your most important tasks, the ones that really make a difference, and scheduling time for them.
So not just a to-do list, but blocking out time in my calendar.
Exactly like appointments you can't miss.
Makes sense. But what about those other things that pop up, emails, phone calls, requests? How do you deal with those?
Robbins talks about eliminating distractions. Turn off notifications, close tabs, create a dedicated space.
Easier said than done these days.
Yeah.
But I get it, it's about focus.
And learning to say no. You can't do everything. Be selective about what you commit to. Don't be afraid to decline things that don't align with your priorities.
Protect your time and energy. Robbins also shares chunking, grouping similar tasks together.
Instead of checking email, constantly set a time block to process it all at once. Group similar tasks and do them in batches.
So focused bursts of activity instead of constantly switching gears.
Exactly. Maximize focus, minimize transitions, and delegate. If someone else can do it, free yourself up for the things only you can do.
It's about building a team, even if it's just asking a friend or outsourcing. Now, Robbins shifts gears and goes into relationships. He says the quality of our lives is directly tied to the quality of our relationships.
He's a big believer in communication as the foundation of any good relationship.
So it's not just about being nice. It's about expressing our needs clearly and listening to the needs of others.
Robbins shares techniques like using I statements instead of you statements, which can be accusatory. And active listening, really focusing on what they're saying without interrupting or planning your response.
Be present, not just waiting for your turn to talk.
And he talks about the different ways men and women communicate. Men are more solution-focused, women are more process-oriented.
So men jump to fixing things while women want to talk about their feelings.
Generally, yes. But by seeing those differences, we can avoid confusion and communicate better.
Just like a new language, the language of relationships. A big challenge in relationships is conflict. It's going to happen.
Robbins says it's inevitable, but it doesn't have to be bad. Approach it with understanding, not judgment.
So instead of proving who's right or wrong, try to understand where they're coming from.
Exactly. Ask questions, listen, and try to see their perspective. What are their needs, fears?
Like putting on their glasses, trying to see through their eyes.
And once you understand, you can find common ground and a solution that works for both of you.
Collaboration, not competition. Robbins also stresses forgiveness. Holding on to anger only hurts us.
He sees it as a gift to yourself. Let go of the past and move on.
So it's not about condoning the behavior, it's about releasing the anger and resentment.
Right. Choosing peace. Robbins then talks about creating a compelling future. We need something to strive for, something to get us excited and motivated.
So it's not just fixing what's broken, it's creating something new and inspiring to pull us forward.
Exactly. Visualize your ideal future, write down goals, create a vision board.
Like a blueprint for the life we want.
And surround yourself with positive people who support your goals and inspire you.
Ditch the energy vampires and find people who lift you up and challenge you to grow. Robbins introduces this radical concept. We can choose our emotions. We're not victims of our feelings. We decide how we want to feel.
Sounds wild, but he has evidence. He says our emotions are largely based on our physiology and our language.
So if I'm down to Jep, I can change my mood by focusing on something positive, changing my posture to one of confidence and using empowering language.
Exactly. He even suggests a success ritual every morning to set the tone and get into a good state.
So instead of hitting snooze and checking social media, I could do something that energizes me and puts me in a good mood.
Precisely. Taking control.
That makes sense. Now, what about when those negative emotions do show up? What does Robbins say about handling those?
He says don't suppress them. Understand them. What's the message?
So instead of just feeling anxious, I could ask, what's making me feel this way? What am I afraid of?
Exactly. Once you understand the root, you can address it instead of just trying to numb it. Robbins emphasizes gratitude.
Oh yeah, gratitude is powerful.
It's a way to shift our state.
It's so easy to get caught up in what's wrong or what we don't have.
Mm.
Gratitude is like hitting reset and focusing on what we do have.
He says keep a gratitude journal, write down things you're thankful for every day, no matter how small.
Even simple stuff like a sunny day or a good cup of coffee.
Exactly. It's training your brain to notice the good stuff. He also talks about love being this powerful force. Yeah. He says express love to people you care about, do random acts of kindness, and forgive those who have hurt you.
Forgiveness is tough, but I get it. Holding on to resentment is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die.
Right. It only hurts you. Robbins also talks about taking care of our physical health.
Our bodies.
He calls them our temples. Treat them with respect.
So that means good food, exercise, and enough sleep.
Right.
Easy to let those slip when we're busy.
But they're the foundation.
Yeah.
He also talks about managing stress.
Stress is everywhere.
It's a silent killer. We need healthy ways to cope: meditation, breathing exercises, nature, whatever works.
Finding those little moments of peace and rejuvenation, Robbins then gets into money.
Ah, everyone's favorite topic.
He says it's a tool could be used for good or bad. It's up to us.
Develop a healthy relationship with money, not one of fear or lack, but abundance and possibility. Budget, save, invest wisely.
Be proactive, not just hoping for the best. And I like what he says about giving back. Sharing our wealth creates a ripple effect.
Exactly. Now he brings up this big question. What's our purpose?
Whoa.
Robbins says we all have unique gifts to share, and it's our job to find and express them.
It's not about finding this one big calling, right?
Yeah.
More like exploring passions and what lights us up, even if it's just a hobby.
Exactly. Follow your gut, take risks, step outside your comfort zone, and see what sparks your soul.
That can be scary.
Yeah.
But exciting too, right?
Yeah.
Knowing we all have this potential waiting to be unlocked.
That's what Robbins is about, empowering us to awaken that giant within. He gives us the tools, the strategies, and maybe most importantly, the belief in ourselves.
I love that he's real about it. He talks about the challenges, the setbacks, the resistance we all face. But we have the power to choose a different path to rewrite our stories.
He pushes us to live with excellence, to always grow, to never stop learning. He shows us that we're not limited by our past or our fears. We have the power to create the future we want.
Powerful message. This deep dive has been about recognizing our own power to change, to step into our potential, and to live a life of purpose. Thanks for joining us on this journey, and remember, you have the power to awaken that giant within.